All right, halftime of Thursday Night Football between the Dolphins and the Ravens, so I wanted to talk some Eagles here. And there is a major Eagles trade rumor, which is the talk of this Philadelphia Eagles fan base right now. And it's that the Eagles are very interested in Myles Garrett with the NFL trade deadline coming up on Tuesday. Also, Jaire Alexander, a healthy scratch for the Ravens defense tonight. Could Howie Roseman target him and make a trade for him after Philadelphia was rumored to show some interest during the offseason? Before we get into all of that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm bringing you daily Eagles coverage. Love talking about this football team. Appreciate all of the real ones who continue to support this show. Become a real one. Become a member. Lock us in and hit that subscribe button. So here is what Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports said about the Eagles' interest in Myles Garrett. He was doing a radio hit in Nashville, and he said this quote, "There's a rumor going around, and I have not heard it out of the Eagles, but I've heard it from a couple of other super high-ranking people in other teams that are clearly on the phones, that Howie Roseman and the Eagles are super hot after Myles Garrett, that Howie Roseman would give up like 3 first-round picks for him, which, you know, if it's coming from the Eagles, those are 3 late firsts. So it's even arguable. When you get through the draft process, how many first-round grades do you really have? Maybe you have between 14 and 18 in a typical year, and that means if you're drafting in the late 20s, early 30s, you're not even getting a player that's really considered on your board unless you're lucky. You're not going to get a player that maybe you have a first-round grade on. But yeah, that's kind of this little rumor out there, like, hey, Howie would really love a shot at Myles Garrett, but again, I was told by the Browns they're not interested in moving him. Obviously, that's so fascinating on so many different fronts. This offseason, there was a lot of buzz that Howie Roseman was interested in Myles Garrett. I remember being at the NFL Combine, and we asked Howie directly about Myles Garrett, and obviously he said what he always says. I can't talk about players who are currently with other teams, but we're going to leave no stone unturned. We're always going to try to improve this football team. And we know that Howie really values and prioritizes the defensive line, but also pass rushers. The Eagles have this organizational philosophy. We'll build up the offensive line. We'll build up the defensive line. And my philosophy when building a team, you have to find a quarterback. Eagles have that in Jalen Hurts. You have to protect the quarterback. Eagles usually been able to do that with their offensive line. This is something that Andy Reid and Joe Banner, starting in the early 2000s, really valued. Howie was an intern, fresh out of the University of Florida. And so he's adopted that philosophy. And then lastly, you got to be able to get after the quarterback. And I believe that's how you build a really good football team. So obviously, Myles Garrett is part of that as far as getting after the quarterback and hunting the quarterback. Now, Jeremy Fowler had said this the other day he said this earlier in the offseason, then I'll get to what he said the other day about Myles Garrett's contract. Sorry about that. He said, conversations some people in the league have had that the Eagles, who are notoriously one of the more aggressive teams in the trade market, looking for a pass rusher under the assumption that Josh Sweat going to sign somewhere else in free agency. Obviously, he did that with Arizona. He got $19 million per year. And Fowler talked about how he wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles step in and try to trade for Myles Garrett so that the Commanders wouldn't, because at that time, Washington was looking to upgrade their defense because they gave up 55 points in the NFC Championship game to the Birds, and last year defensively, they weren't great. And so Fowler added Myles Garrett. The Eagles would not want to see him go to Washington, for an example. And so if that was to gain traction, Howie Roseman would likely step in to try to make a deal that is too hard for the Cleveland Browns to refuse. Diana Russini, also during the offseason, had reported that the Eagles were in on Myles Garrett, very interested in trading for him. Now, this was a conversation because we got to New Orleans on the Sunday of Super Bowl week. On Monday, we get set up on Radio Row, and there was that story of the day on the Monday of the Super Bowl rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs that Myles Garrett had requested a trade. And he said, I want to go somewhere else because obviously the losing was taking a toll. He remained pretty insistent that he wanted to get dealt. But the Browns continued to say, we're not trading Myles Garrett. And so this lasted for a long time. Even at the NFL Combine, Andrew Berry had said, we're not trading Myles Garrett. We don't want to trade him. But Myles Garrett and his camp kept saying, we want to get traded. We want to go somewhere else. Probably wants to play meaningful football, right? Of course he folded. The Browns made him at the time the highest paid defensive player in the history of football. They gave him a fat contract, and Garrett said, trade request? No more. I'll take the money. But then last week, Browns play the Patriots. Myles Garrett has one of the finest games you'll ever see. 5 sacks in a single game. And then when the offense continued to sputter, and when the Browns got to a spot where they were clearly going to lose, Myles Garrett flipped out on the sideline, threw his helmet. This week, in a press conference, he said, it's not going to be any easier if you keep asking me about it, clearly frustrated with the situation with the Cleveland Browns. Now, that's Myles Garrett's fault. He demanded a trade. He should have not signed that contract, in my opinion, if he was going to get so easily frustrated with Cleveland. You knew what was going to happen. They're a dumpster fire organization. They're an absolute joke. But could it get to a point where the Browns do trade him away? And could the Eagles somehow land him? Obviously, such a fascinating topic. Myles Garrett, one of the best players in the history of the National Football League. He's going to go down as one of the best ever to do it. 8 straight seasons of double-digit sacks, so he's also been extremely durable. He already has 10 sacks this year. He had 5 in that game against New England. And the resume that he's already been able to put together by the time that he's 29, he turns 30 December 29th. He was already the number 1 pick out of Texas A&M back in 2017, Defensive Player of the Year in 2023, 4-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, All-Rookie team, unanimous All-American. Guy's a freak. And how he's built looks like Adonis out there. I mean, chiseled like he's a statue in the Roman Empire. 6'4", 272 pounds, powerful, has speed, is able to use a variety of pass rush moves in order to get to the quarterback. This guy is truly one of one. But 3 first-round picks, that's the rumor, that's the report. That is an insane asking price. Now, on one end, you trade for Myles Garrett. You need a pass rusher right now. It makes your defense so much better. Myles Garrett on a defensive line with Jalen Carter, with Jalen Hunt, Nolan Smith on the other side, Brandon Graham as a backup. In Vic Fangio's defense, he's been blitzing a lot this year, a lot more than he would prefer. With Myles Garrett, not going to have to blitz as much. What does that do? Makes the secondary's job a lot easier. You trade for Myles Garrett, you become the favorites to win the Super Bowl. And how did you win last year against Kansas City? Your pass rush. Didn't blitz once, and you got after Patrick Mahomes all night long to the point where he had one of, if not the worst games of his career. As far as the dead cap charge that Cleveland would have to take on, that obviously is a part of this conversation. He signed a 4-year, $160 million contract with the Browns. Dan Graziano did say this, though, earlier this week, ESPN Insider, about the dead cap charge. He said, quote, the thing is, I dug into the contract a bit this week, and I don't think it's out of the question that the Browns could trade Garrett, even this week, if he really wanted out. The extension added $7 million to his 2025 compensation, $6 million to his 2026 compensation. It also guaranteed him about $30.5 million for 2027. The signing bonus on the new deal, around $21 million, isn't super onerous for a contract of that size. If the Browns traded him right now, his 2025 cap number would stay the same, and they'd incur about $41 million in dead money for 2026, roughly $17.5 million more than his current 2026 cap charge. So obviously they have to eat a lot of dead money. And they might be hesitant to do that because they're just getting over the Deshaun Watson contract and cap charge and dead money hit. Obviously, they're paying him to just stay away at this point. But from the Browns' standpoint, they are not close to competing. You get 3 first-round picks. I know like Charles Robinson had said, you might not have first-round grades on those guys that you get later on. I mean, we're talking 3 first-round picks on top of your own. So that's 6 first-round picks that you can use at your disposal for 6 different players to make your team better, or package those picks to move up in the draft. I mean, get out of here with that, right? If you have second-round picks and third-round picks, we see hits in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. These rosters are 53. They're not an NBA roster. Draft picks are very valuable for building a team. Look at what the Eagles have done. Quinyon Mitchell, 22nd pick. Cooper DeJean, 2nd round. Nolan Smith, late 1st. Jahad Campbell, 31st overall. There's a lot of value in having 1st and 2nd round picks when you want to rebuild, which is what the Browns should probably do. It's just unfortunate, right? Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, legendary players. Some of the GOATs, right? Some of the best players right now in the NFL. If you don't think that they're in the GOAT conversation or are going to be at some point, they're playing meaningless football every single week. And in a sport where you have to sacrifice your body and give so much to do all of that to not win, you're doing it for the passion for the game. You're doing it for yourself. But I'm telling you right now, I love hosting shows because I love talking sports. I like talking about the Eagles because I've been a fan since I was 4 years old. I'm the vice president of content strategy here at Chat Sports. We dominate the YouTube platform. I do this because I love it, but I'm not going to lie. I also do this because I get an adrenaline rush when I know that I have led the company in YouTube revenue generated this football season. And since I've been added here to the Chat Sports team, I instantly became profitable. And I bring in a ton of money for our company to grow and for me to grow individually, personally, and professionally. And I'm working for a company that I love working for, and we're having success. To be playing on a team where you're not having team success, that would bother me a lot. So, just wanted to talk about that because it's just so interesting on so many fronts, and obviously it is the topic of conversation among Eagles fans right now. Now, on Twitter, I did see a lot of Eagles fans saying, Jaire Alexander, healthy scratch tonight. Could Howie Roseman trade for him? I know he's a former All-Pro. I know the Eagles were said to be interested in him this offseason. I'm out on Jaire Alexander. Don't think he's that good of a player at this point of his career. He's been injured a ton, can barely stay on the field. I would rather just go with what the Eagles have. Try Jacorian Bennett on the outside. If it doesn't work, move Cooper DeJean to the outside. You have Michael Carter in the slot. That's still a damn good secondary. But Jaire Alexander has been awful this year. A PFF coverage grade of 31. A passer rating allowed of 118. 23.2 yards per catch. Only 43 coverage snaps, so small sample size, but still not about it. All right. Hopefully everybody out there enjoys the rest of your Thursday. If you're watching this on Friday, I hope you're having a great Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now. Thanks for supporting the show. Content to come all throughout the weekend. It might be a bye week, but the coverage and the videos do not stop.